Welcome to the Miracle You, guiding you on the journey towards finding passion and purpose and how to discover, create, and live a life by your design. Whether your success has been plentiful or your missed opportunities have been overwhelming, we can help you become a more empowered, masterful person and show you how to share your gift with the world. It's time to inspire change from within with the host of the Miracle You, Vince Kramer.
Hello, imagination. I'm Vince Kramer, your host, and welcome to the Miracle You, where you learn about the magic of living your life by finding the example in real life.
We all experience challenge in our lives. Those challenges are actually created or co-created for us or by us to help us experience life in a way that benefits us walking our journey, moving fully into our divine intent. Some of those challenges early in our lives end up forming beliefs that we can choose later on to reframe, or we can continue to live from the trauma or the pain that we've experienced early in our lives. But the trauma and pain that we experienced helped us develop a belief system that took us on a journey of developing our gifts and talents. And once those gifts and talents have been developed, and once we move fully into the adult mind, we can choose to change those beliefs. We can choose to move on. Other challenges come along to help us look at life and decide, is this the way we want to show up? Are we truly living who we are? Or is it time for us to choose a new way? When we choose a new way, we can fully step into living our divine intent, really bringing the reason that we came to earth to our lives. I'm with Martin O'Toole today. Martin is a man on the mend, a recovered alcoholic with a debauched and materially immersed past life of spilled milk under burnt bridges. Moments from suicide, his beagle talked him out of it. This rock bottom moment launched a phenomenal journey of self-healing and personal transformation. Through his experiences of the pointless pursuance of success, Martin uncovered the alchemy of everlasting happiness. Understanding the depths of depression and contrasting heights of delight, his compulsion to share his story has resulted in a podcast and brand new book, How to Die Happy. Martin O'Toole, are you ready to share the miracle of you with the imagination?
I sure am, Vince. I am indeed. Shoot.
As I was doing my research for our podcast today, there's so many things that I learned about you that are definitely in alignment with Imagine Miracles and what we share, but you've got your own personal part of really bringing purpose to the world. So I was wondering if you'd share just a little bit about what you're doing right now to help people on that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, saving the précis story that got me here, 2 months ago, I published my first book, which is called How to Die Happy, which is a self-help book, I suppose, combining curated wisdom, stories, and practical utilities for the art of living well. So what I'm doing right now is promoting that book, and not from a self-centered perspective. It's a very heart-centered proposition, although quite clearly it would be helpful if I could earn some kind of living from publishing more books like this, because then I can keep doing what I've set out to do now, and that is I've completely pivoted my life's journey. And as a result of that, I'm now in this incredible space where I'm talking to people like you about a message of self-healing, of self-love, of forgiveness, and of all these other incredible things, these skills that people might not know they have, which I'm very keen to talk about to as many people as possible.
You know, I really want to dive deep into the years that got you here. But before we go there, would you explain to everyone We talk about wake up calls all the time on the Miracle You podcast. Would you explain to everyone this last wake up for you where you chose to, I'm trying to remember exactly the way you put it, something like live the remainder of my life dedicated in service to others. What's the wake up call that helped you step into that understanding?
Beautiful question. Quite a long answer, so I'll try to condense it for you. I had, I suppose, one, two, three, a three-stage wake up. I don't know if that's common or uncommon, but this is my truth. So the first stage was 2015, a bottle of gin and a lot of narcotics inside my belly, and a double-barreled shotgun pointed at my face, and it was me pointing the gun at me. And for any of your listeners who are gun owners, they will know that gun safety comes first for all of us, and we never point the barrel of a gun at anybody, regardless of whether or not it's loaded, let alone ourselves. So to consciously point a double barrel loaded gun at one's face is quite it's an interesting proposition. Yeah, and I came immensely close to killing myself. I was lost. I was filled with shame and guilt. I was buried by the overwhelming weight of depression, and I simply could not see a way out. Actually, my beagle talked me out of it, and I talk about this in the book. There's a chapter in my book called "Last Night a Beagle Saved My Life," and anybody who's fans of disco will see what I did there. And yeah, fast forward, that wasn't, you would think that that would be the rock bottom moment, because it was certainly a rock bottom moment, a very significant one at that. But then it took me another 3 years of 3 years of self-sabotage, of suffering, and alcohol and drug abuse, even deeper, I suppose, to get to the point where one day and night I got so blind drunk. I woke up in a hotel room that I'd smashed to pieces, and I'd torn the meniscus in my knee. I had to lie to a bunch of people I was doing work with that day. I winged it through the day, and then I went on a snowboarding holiday 2 weeks after, which of course I'd ruined because I couldn't snowboard. So I left my poor partner at the time having to ski every day while I sat in a bar, in an Austrian bar at the bottom of a ski slope, just drinking very strong Austrian beer all day, which is, that's a lot of drinking for anybody, even for a hardened, high functioning addict and alcoholic like me. So yeah, the last day of that holiday, she came down from the slopes, my partner, and I put this pint glass down, and I just said, "That's the last drink I'm ever going to have." And that was February the 9th, 2018. And of course she said, "Yeah, right." And then of course I got home to England, and all my friends said, "Yeah, right." There were times, Vince, when I said, "Yeah, right." But it's now April 2023, and I never did have another glass of any alcohol whatsoever. So that was the beginning of this incredible journey of sobriety. But even that was just 2 stages of the awakening. Stage 3 really was, my awakening was strapped to a rocket, actually. I'd been here in Bali. I'd closed down my successful business in London. Oh no, actually, sorry, it was just prior to that. Sorry, I'm getting my own timeline mixed up. Before I came to Bali, my awakening was strapped to a rocket by a couple of friends who introduced me to a very potent psychedelic medicine known as ayahuasca. And it's safe to say that any questions I had lingering about divinity were blown out of the water when I experienced with ayahuasca. And it's safe to say that the psychedelic work actually did absolutely put pay to any idea that I might have of using or drinking ever again. So then I took the experiences with ayahuasca and huachuma, which is the San Pedro cactus, and began to what they know in the psychonautical community is integrate. So my integration was to work deeper with meditation, to work deeper with yoga, with silent retreats. With sound healing. I see that you've got some absolutely beautiful looking crystal bowls behind me, behind you. It's behind me. I absolutely love to be immersed in singing bowl healing center healing sessions. So yeah, it's been a roller coaster few years. I was very fortunate to have a whole year. Obviously, after I'd worked with the ayahuasca for the first time, they say you're not supposed to make any major life-changing decisions for at least 3 months. 3 days later, I was back in London in my boardroom telling everyone in my creative agency, I'm really sorry, guys, but I'm closing it all down. What? It's the best month we've ever had in 5 years of business. I know, but we're all the problem. I'm desperately unhappy. I love you all to bits, but I can't do this anymore. I was in the midst of a third nervous breakdown, and I just can't keep harming myself like this. So I got to go away. I got to go and live in Bali, and I've got to go and find stillness. And I was very fortunate at that time to spend a year just doing no work but the work, which, as many of your listeners will know, did and should begin with shadow work. And I took myself through this incredible self-prescribed process of healing, which I managed to do in quite an intensive period of time because I didn't have anything else to distract me. I lived quite a monastic life.
Well, let me ask you this, Martin. As let's go back into your childhood, your adulthood, those places where you needed the substance to move beyond those things that were going on in your life. So what you mentioned depression already. Were there other things that you were experiencing that you kind of self-medicated with the narcotics and the alcohol?
That's a great question. Of course, I wasn't aware of my behavior at the time. Of course, most people will tell you that a narcissist is not aware that they're a narcissist. And nor are many alcoholics aware that they're alcoholics or drug addicts, especially when you're high functioning. I managed to hold down a really decent career. I co-founded several companies. And of course, I was in an industry that actively encouraged or accepted alcoholism and cocaine use, especially. You know, the two things, the two things, and the advertising industry go hand in hand. So I wasn't aware at the time what it was I was distracting myself from. As it transpired, there were two things really. Of course, the first thing was my childhood trauma. My mum was an alcoholic, and had been my whole life, and so I experienced a great deal of strangeness. Obviously, a lot of shouting and crashing and bashing and very, very strange behavior. I remember I would, as a small child, sit on the landing outside my mum's bedroom, you know, with just looking through the crack of the hinges, you know, the door, so I could watch her, because obviously I, as a child, was very, very concerned for her, but I was also seeking intimacy from my mum, which I couldn't get because she wasn't available. But she would sit there with a glass of wine. She had 2 large bottles of wine every night. She would stop at the you would call liquor store on the way home to get them, and then she would just sit in the bed smoking and drinking. But the more she drank, the more she would hiss and argue, you know, bitterly, vitriolically with something, you know, with someone. And one might well argue, you know, we talk about the demon of drink. I do I do now very much believe that she had a dark passenger along for the ride. But these were things that I was witnessing as a small child, which, as you can imagine, aren't really very good. So I didn't realize at the time, but of course I was a victim of abuse. I was a victim of gross neglect for my whole childhood. And so I guess I probably did a very good job of normalizing that. My therapist, Michael, did suggest to me once, he congratulated me for my for what was a very skilled way of dealing with very complex emotions and trauma, but managing to almost keep it in a container. But of course, I wasn't keeping it in a container, which leads me to the second point, and that was as a young adult, I began very unhealthy relationships with women. And of course, I was an alcoholic and a drug addict, narcissistic, suffering from, or at least showing, I was never diagnosed, but showing all the traits of narcissistic personality disorder. And of course, utilizing a sex addiction as a way to put a thick layer of distraction on top of the distraction on top of the distraction. So it was a real mess. It was an absolute tram smash, Vince. I caused heartache to many, many, many people. I was dishonest to everyone around me. I was unfaithful to the majority of my partners, of which there were many. And of course, all the while I lied to and hurt myself. So there was a lot of distraction to unpick. And I suppose when you're living that kind of lifestyle at the same time as growing businesses and driving around in nice cars and yada yada, in the pursuit of happiness, or as it later transpired, the dogged, determined pursuit of unhappiness, we don't look around. We don't look around at all, and we certainly don't look the most important place, and that is inwards. So it's safe to say I am immensely grateful for the trauma and the lessons, because I eventually saw them for what they are, and that is gifts. But there was a time, make no mistake, where I almost took my own life. And man alive, pardon the pun, man alive, talking about suicide. But had I done that in 2015, I would have missed out on such an incredible journey of transformation, which of course has resulted in this book behind me, How to Die Happy.
The amazing thing about it is what we don't really see until it's time to awaken is there's that non-physical part of us who's working to get us to that place to get us to that place where we're ready to wake up and we're ready to stay awake. And I think you say it was a 3-part awakening for you. I think we all have stages of awakening. Very few of us it hits that moment that, wow, I've got to live different, and I'm going to live different right now. It seems to walk into our understanding of, okay, this is really where I want to go. Okay, this makes sense on how I'm going to get there. Before I talk to you a little bit about your shadow work and the things that you've learned and you're sharing now, I'm sure the audience wants to know, what did the beagle say to you?
Ah, what a wonderful question. I was in a very dark room. I was in metaphorically, because of course I was in a very dark place as well. And I had pushed the door closed. I'd actually begun cleaning my gun. That's how it all started. But of course I was drunk and still drinking, and then eventually talked myself into to getting ready to kill myself. And she was quite a young dog at the time. She just pushed the door open, which was no mean feat for this little dog, because with a thick shag, carpet. And she pushed the door open and just stood. She stood and then sat in the light, which metaphorically is interesting in itself. Just sat in the light and looked up at me. I don't know if she was saying, don't do it, or who's going to feed me, or maybe it was both. But whatever she said, I got the message, and I just I kind of looked down at it. I immediately moved the gun, broke it, popped out the cartridges, and I started crying as I looked down at her, and she came right to me. And I don't know what your perspective is of dogs, but I genuinely believe they are angels in fur coats, and vessels for higher dimensional beings, who act as our guides. There's no other way to put it. And that dog actually then followed me. Because my mum died, actually. My mum had died prior to that, about a year before. The timeline's a little bit murky, obviously, as you would expect for someone who abused so many drugs and alcohol. But it was her death that sent me spiraling. But then, of course, it was also her death that sent me spiraling into an awakening. So, I say quite often that a person's death can actually often be the best thing that can happen to you. But
we call it a crisis wake up, but there are so many
Mm.
types of crises that happen in our lives that finally get our attention. And I love the way that you said it spiraled you into awakening. It's sometimes we, as you say, the bottom kind of changes for us, and when we find that bottom, however it is, through what that crisis brings to us, it opens our eyes. So
Yeah.
these voices, well, we all have these voices, the sub-personalities that are trying to keep us safe, moving in the right direction. And, a lot of it is based on our belief system, which our shadows are huge parts of our belief system through all of this. And the ayahuasca really helps you get beyond those sub-personalities.
Oh, yeah.
When your first experience with ayahuasca, and that first time that you got past those personalities, what did you experience?
Wow. Well, the ayahuasca is, in my mind, one of the most incredible teachers available to us. The grandmother, as we call her, she, for those listening who aren't familiar with the medicine, that we refer to the medicine as a feminine because more often than not, 99.9% of the time, we are visited and indeed guided by a feminine entity, believed to be a deity, a goddess. And certainly on your first journey and my first journey, she is always very, very gentle. Now, for me, it was incredibly strong medicine, and because I'd already been sober for a year, and I was doing a lot of the physical work already, I was eating clean, or relatively clean, compared, and I did the dieta for it, which is a 2-week diet. So I received the medicine very well, and man, what didn't I see on that first journey? One of the things that she did first was, and as you've identified, this medicine sort of peels back all the layers of ego in one effortless move, so that she can just reach on down into your subconscious, unconscious, and begin to pick out events that we, of course, attach trauma, to which we attach trauma. But the way she did it was not to provide me with a memory, just Martin's memory. And I say Martin as in the Martin stories memory, not my consciousness consciousness's memory. That was an expression. I saw my perspective, the other person's perspective, anybody else's perspective who was in the space at the time, essentially the universe's perspective of the event. It's like 4K TV with a fully immersive, forget your virtual reality. It's next level. It's reality because in no time and no space we are really where we're from. So I, one by one these events were represented to me, and one by one I rapidly understood them for what they were: gifts, lessons, and one by one was able to let go of them due to the fact that I could also see their impermanence, i.e. they were in the past, they don't exist anymore. So that happened, and then I went to a place of unity consciousness where there was I can only describe kind of like a murmuration of entities, all moving in unison, singing. The symphony was beautiful, and they were all waving at me, and then one entity came forth and welcomed me back. And I said, "What do you mean, welcome back?" And there was sort of a bit of fun. There was some laughing had on their side, but laughing with me. And then suddenly I began to realize, hang on a minute, I've been here before, haven't I? Yes. I'm from here, aren't I? Yes, yes, you are. So, and suddenly I began to remember, and then boom, 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 all this information started to be delivered to me. I'm talking about, life, love, the universe, quantum physics, the illusion of the life in which we live in third density, the holograph or the hologram of the whole thing. And I was receiving this information all at the same time and comprehending it all at the same time, which of course is quite incomprehensible for the human brain. And I just began laughing and laughing and laughing, and tears streamed down my face as my friends welcomed me back, and as my friends witnessed me remembering my true essence. And I'm sure there was a lot of other things that happened, but as you likely know, with the ayahuasca and with other psychedelic experiences, we very quickly forget as the layers of ego and conditioning and this thing we call life come back almost to haunt us, you might say. Then our essence becomes quieter. But I've worked with ayahuasca many times now, many times, and more medicines to boot, and as a result of that, you remember more, which is a beautiful thing. So yeah, I mean,
I think the most powerful part of what you just shared is that in the understanding that we are part of the whole, there is no separation out there, then it's not about learning new things. It's about remembering what you knew before we made this transformation into the 3D world to experience and expand energy here. We remember. And one of the things that I've learned on my journey is that the remembering, or as we start moving back into the old way of living, is just us moving back into the slower vibration. The medicine gives us the opportunity to truly live at our highest vibration, at least where we can live in the moment. And then as that vibration comes back down, we start forgetting. But we learn over time how to hold the vibration longer and longer. So it's really powerful. So you had the experience. You started finding, where do I need to heal myself? How do I look at those things that I don't love about me through your shadow work? And then that led you to the podcast and the book. Tell us about How to Die Happy and what the book is all about.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, I had another plant medicine journey. I was working a lot with psilocybin, and I did a psilocybin journey where I was able to skip all the way through what we call Bardo TV, the multiple densities and all of these characters wanting to talk to you. Hey, I've got some information for you. Nope, not today. Hey, I want to tell you about this. I know, I'm sure it's super important, but not today. I want to go somewhere still, and I want to speak to my higher self. And that's what I did. So I appeared in this in a incredible luminous space with an entity which I identified to be my higher self. And we had a quick conversation. What have you been up to, Martin? Well, wowzers. A lot of cool stuff's happened in the last few years. Yeah, I know, it's pretty cool. And I had a conversation where I explained that I just had this realization about ego and about ego's function. How do I explain this? Well, obviously, it has multiple functions, but in this context, the realization was that ego's function keeps us attached in third density. Without our sense of the illusion of ourself, we don't exist. And of course, then that is then shared by the collective consciousness, which means that you see that I exist as well. You know this stuff, and hopefully the audience is staying with me here. And through this realization, this character said, "All right, you've worked it out." I said, "Yeah, I'm really, really, yeah, I think I have. I get the illusion. I'm keeping myself alive." "Yes, you are." And then he sort of gestured and said, "Okay, you can cross over there if you want." And there's a rainbow bridge appeared, the whole, the archetype, and I said, "What, you're literally inviting me to cross over the rainbow bridge?" "Yep." "Like ascend?" "Yeah, that's what you call it." All right. Well, obviously I'm extremely interested in this proposition. And I started to go, and then as they say in near-death experiences, my whole life flashed right before my eyes, and it was I stopped and I said, "Wait, there's a catch here, isn't there?" "Yes." "Yeah, the Martin story." "Yes, the Martin story. If I cross over here, the Martin story will end." "Correct." "Which means Martin dies." "Yeah, that's right. Yeah." "Ah, okay, that's interesting." So then I spent, I don't know how long, because I was in no time and no space, debating how I actually felt about that, how attached I was to Martin and to Martin's life in third density. And in reality, I wasn't attached, which I suppose was part of the beauty of the invitation, right? Because I wasn't attached. But what I did realize was I'd spent 25 years in the marketing industry, in the communications business. I spent 4 years or whatever it was, 2 years at that time, doing intensive work to find out this incredible truth about who we are not. And I suddenly had this realization that I wanted to come back, and I wanted to apply my communication skills to try to translate this information in a way that anybody could get on board. And that is to say, people who may well still be 100% plugged in the matrix, not necessarily people who are awakened at all. But essentially, I came back and I started the podcast, the How to Die Happy podcast, and that was in late 2021, and I started to toy with writing the book. I probably spent about 18 months writing How to Die Happy, and the last 6 months prior to publishing in February were intense. And what I've tried to do with this book is to say, look, I'm no guru, I'm no PhD, I'm no coach, I'm just a man on the mend. And in my experiences, I've managed to learn some very cool stuff from people like Buddha, Jeshua, Confucius, Eckhart Tolle, Kurt Cobain. There are all sorts of people who I end up quoting in this book. Ancient wisdom is part of the point, because you when you look at Buddhism, for example, I always thought, when I wasn't really aware of any of this stuff, I always thought Buddhism was this sort of weird religion with bald people who wore yellow and red robes. Now I understand Buddhism essentially to be a handbook for interdimensional travelers existing on Earth. So I threw all of this in, and a bunch of my own personal stories. For example, the time I nearly killed myself, my mum dying, how I overcame grief, and a bunch of other stuff, and a pile of practical utilities. So the idea of the book really is to say, look, we're all having a human experience, and we are all suffering. And through our egoic conditioning, and the ridiculous layers of distraction that are assaulting us from all angles now in this day and age on planet Earth, we suffer, and we believe our suffering to be unique, and it's not. And that's not to do down anyone's suffering. That's not to set it aside, but it is to discuss how we openly have conversations about death, about grieving, about suffering, without assuming the role of victim, and instead asking ourselves how can we transmute that pain into something beautiful, into a lesson that enables us to continue around the spiral of life. I talk about spirals a lot because I believe lessons come in spirals, and of course toroidals and all of that sort of stuff. So that's what the
There are
book.
so many things that the book is providing, because it's really the example that we see around us. Who and what did we attract into our lives? And for those that are listening to this podcast, you are lining up energetically to attract this book into your life, to learn a little bit more through the examples that Martin shared. Believe it or not, Martin, we're close to the end of our time. What is the one thing that you want everyone to take away from our time together today?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me, Vince. And I apologize for just wittering on. I hope it was a helpful conversation. I would say the one thing I want anybody to take away from any conversations I'm having is to learn to love. And that's really the primary message of this book is learn to love. And of course, we'll do that by embracing, choosing change primarily, and seeing that all things are impermanent. So yeah, learn to love, and it all starts here. Of course, that's the big deal. That's where the shadow work piece comes into play.
That's one of the things that the imagination is very familiar with. At 5 years old, I told my grandmother that I wanted to help people love themselves so they could love others. And that's what I was sharing with you before we got started. Our divine intents, our reason for being here are so aligned. So I appreciate you coming on as a guest and sharing through your book, sharing through your podcast. It's absolutely amazing. So we appreciate you so much. How can people get your book?
Oh, good question. Well, you can find it pretty much anywhere. You can find it on all the Amazons, and you can find it on Barnes and Noble. There's a paperback, an ebook, or a Kindle, whatever you call it, and an audiobook. So you can find it on all the audiobook platforms. You can go to howtodiehappybook.com for more information. You can find me on Instagram at Martin O'Toole. You can find the podcast, How to Die Happy _podcast. And there's a website for the podcast as well, which is howtodiehappypodcast.com. Pretty much now, if you type How to Die Happy into the Google, I think I'm on page 1 in some way, shape, or form. We've done quite a lot of work to get there. And ultimately, all we're trying to do here is to share practical stories and practical utilities with people so that they can learn the art of living well. It's as simple as that. So we're just sharing the love in all the ways possible.
So I'll make sure all that information is available on the show page. Just go to themiracleyou.com. Look for Martin's episode. You'll find that information there. And he's also giving, as a free gift, a reading of one of his chapters. So it's something that I listened to, and I think it was very helpful for me. And I know it will be very helpful for each and every one of you. Thank you so much, Martin, for joining me today. I appreciate you staying up late to be here. And I know the message that you shared today will make such a difference in the world.
Thank you, Vince. Thanks for everything you're doing. Peace and love.
On behalf of my wife, Mary, and the entire team here at Imagine Miracles, we want to wish each and every one of you a miracle day.
You've completed this episode of The Miracle You, but we have plenty more to help you discover your own personal passion and purpose. Head over to themiracleyou.com for free resources to assist you on your journey, as well as register for our free webinar, Discover Your Miracle Life, 3 Mind Awakening Steps Toward Your Unique Purpose, or apply for a one-on-one Your Life, Your Way breakthrough session and discover your next best step on your journey. All available exclusively on our website. That's themiracleyou.com. We look forward to sharing more experiences of passion, purpose, and life by design next time, right here on The Miracle You.